Yo, what's up? Gamers, it's been a minute since I taught you how to use your Trailblaze power, and that was towards the beginning of the game. A lot of things have changed since then, specifically the things you can spend your Trailblaze power on. And so today, the goal is to show you guys what is new that is worth spending your Trailblaze power on, especially if you're kind of lost and don't really know what to do. And this will also have advice targeted towards newer players of Honkai Star Rail, since there are many of you coming on over. And if you don't know who I am, my name is Braxavode. You can call me Brax, and Sparkle was playing with a Kendama in the year 2024. I have ADHD and don't remember anything I said at the beginning of the video, so I'm just gonna leave you with this segue to a sponsor. I need to be sent to a hospital because I found a game that's targeting me specifically. Cat Fantasy is a game with cats that are girls, which makes them cat girls. Actual real cat girls. None of that, oh, she's the spirit of a cat, or she has mechanical cat ears or mechanical tail. None of that BS. This is like the genuinely real thing, and I don't think you understand how much this means to me. Cat Fantasy is a 3D turn-based card game where you can collect cat girls based on real breeds of cats from all over the world. The girls can be switched for regular cat versions of them, featuring high-quality, fashionable 2D and 3D designs. The characters are fully voiced and even have cool ways to interact with them, but you're probably gonna want to have earbuds in because what the f. The combat is a cool spin on the turn-based card genre, since you can play it in a way that lets you level up your cards as the battle goes on. This really makes the game feel strategic and scratch to your brain in high-level combat. Each cat also has a completely unique ultimate animation. Cat Fantasy launches soon, and you can join both myself and other cat girl enjoyers on mobile devices on August 22nd. New players can claim up to 1,000 free polls within the first 2 weeks. And you can also grab Anya Noreen from a free login bonus right around launch. Make sure to click the link down below to download or pre-register for Cat Fantasy. So first off, basic overview of Trailblaze power. This is what it should look like. Actually, this is what it should never look like. Never let it cap. But if it does cap, you get an overflow, which is kind of cool. Basically, you're limited to this and how much you can spend a day. And that means you have to be careful how you spend it because this is a gacha game and you want to make sure that your investment is spent correctly. Now, the age-old argument that I see is usually about whether or not it's worth leveling traces or getting relics first. And after a year of this game being out, I can confidently say that both are very important, but mostly that I told you so. Listen, in my last video about this a way long time ago, I mentioned that traces are very important. And I got tons of people saying that traces were not that important and you should be focusing on relics first because traces only affect a certain amount of your damage. But oh man, when you don't level traces, you find yourself in some trouble. Both are very important, but the main point is that you're gonna want to invest in your character's traces. Specifically, these 3 things, the major traces. Whenever you're building a new character, you definitely wanna make sure that you grab all of these. There's some characters where like they're not as important, but the amount of gain you get for using the materials on these 3 traces is always gonna be very large. And for characters like supports, getting your traces up, like this gives you a 10% speed buff. This gives you 25% res pen. These are the types of things that will help you a lot in the long run. And your character's multipliers are also just very important. This one's actually not important. You don't need to level your basic attack with Jinglu, but I just really like Jinglu. Traces are very important, and if you're a new player to Honkai Star Rail, I highly recommend focusing on one team at a time, getting one team leveled up, their traces up, their relics up, and then focusing on a second team, and then replacing characters in those individual teams to expand your roster. For example, if you're newer to the game, but you have some characters to build a team with, you build one team, you level up this team, you get all their traces up, and then you farm the right relics for this team, and then you can kind of move on to whatever the next team you're gonna build is. You just wanna make sure that you don't half invest in characters. This is a mistake I see a lot of people making, and this is a mistake that even I have made in the past. If you half invest into your characters, you're going to have a really rough time. Full invest into one of your teams. Then you can focus on your next team, full invest into that team, and then if you want to start doing substitutes and playing different characters, that's when you'd start looking into investing into other characters as well. For example, you know, Gallagher is my fucking goat, and now it's his time to shine. Level him up, get his traces up, and now you just have a substitute for this team that you can use in other teams in the future. You can also use them in the Firefly team, so there you go. But the other thing you want to make sure that you actually invest in is your relics, and this is going to be the most painful part of your entire Honkai Star Rail journey. There are a ridiculous amount of relics in the game now, and a lot more planar sets as well. This means that there is an efficient way to spend your Trailblaze power that's going to get you sets that work on multiple characters, and with the new sets, there are some new sets that are worth farming that are potentially better than farming some of the older relics. Now, which sets are those? I don't know, man, you're kind of on your own. It kind of depends on your account. I can't really look at all of your accounts. I don't even remember what mine looks like half the time, but here are some general sets that are safe to farm. Since there is a new break-focused meta, and since there are so many debuffers in the game right now, this Cavern of Corrosion in Penacony, the Path of the Dream Dive, is going to net you Pioneer Diver of Dead Waters and Watchmaker Master of Dream Machinations. The reason these sets are good is because the 2-piece is going to give you a general damage bonus against enemies with debuffs. So this is not restricted to one specific type of damage bonus. If you go look over here at like the fire set, for example, it gives you a 10% fire damage bonus, which means that it's specific to fire characters. This is just damage bonus dealt to enemies that have debuffs on them. And if you're playing characters like Pela, Silverwolf, Jiaosho, even Aventurine who can apply a debuff, Topaz who can apply a debuff, this is going to increase the character's damage regardless of the element that they are. Now the 4-piece is going to give crit rate and crit damage based on the amount of debuffs that enemies actually have. If you're playing with at least 2 debuffs, this set can be usable on any DPS character in the game. Now it's not necessarily going to be best in slot on every character, but it is very good and very functional on most characters, and it also makes building crit very easy. This set gets even better with 3 debuffs, and if you apply your own debuff, it's even better. There are many characters that can use this and get solid damage out of it, even if it's not their best in slot set. It works very similarly to the Genius of Brilliant Stars set, where you get defense ignore no matter what, and that defense ignore is always going to be huge. If the enemy's weak to quantum, they get 20% defense ignore total instead of just 10%, and it makes it one of the best sets to run on most DPS characters. But the downside to it is that it's paired with Guard of Wuthering Snow, which some players will use as just like random fodder pieces for their supports, but it's not a super necessary set that a lot of characters want. The benefit of farming this set is that you also get Watchmaker Master of Dream Machinations, which is going to give you break effect on the 2-piece and also give you a support 4-piece effect. Now the 4-piece effect isn't super necessary, but you will be using the 2-piece set on basically any break character in the game if you want to mix 2 and 2, which makes this cavern one of the best and most efficient caverns to spend your Trailblaze power on. If you're unsure of what to do, or if you want to farm a set that can work on many different characters, both of these sets are really good. If we move right above that, you can also see this follow-up set and this dot set. Now, this is going to be Ash Blazing Grand Duke. This gives you 20% follow-up attack damage for the 2-piece and also gives you an attack buff for follow-up attackers. And this set, Prisoner in Deep Confinement, gives you an attack buff while also giving you defense ignore for enemies that have dots inflicted on them. Now, if you are a dot player or a follow-up attack player, this is going to be your bread and butter. This is where you're going to live because a 2-piece set effect is already really good on most follow-up users. The 4-piece, you might not even use it, but having 2 pieces is nice, and having 2 pieces of the dot set is going to be good on most characters if you just need to fill in a 2-2 combo, like 2-piece attack percent, 2-piece damage bonus, etc. But the 4-piece is also going to be best in slot for dot characters. So if you have a Kafka Black Swan team, this is going to work for your Topaz, your Himiko, your Herda, etc. Like, as you can see, look how many characters can use both of these sets. Both of these Caverns of Corrosion are highly efficient. Now, this one is an older set that a lot of people still choose to farm, and I'm going to go ahead and say you absolutely don't have to farm this one. The Cavern of Corrosion Path of Drifting is going to give you access to Wild Wheat and Passerby of Wandering Cloud. A lot of characters can use Wild Wheat, either just for the attack buff and the speed buff and basic attack damage, or just the 2-piece attack buff. And Wandering Cloud works on basically every healer in the game. But there's a lot of other sets you can use for characters that would maybe want to use Wild Wheat and for Passerby of Wandering Cloud. So you absolutely don't have to farm this, especially because you'll get Wild Wheat just by playing the game. But Wild Wheat and Wandering Cloud is a decent one to farm if you're not sure what to do. And the last one that is worth farming for relics is going to be the speed set and the max HP set. Now this one you can just end up using on healers or on your supports if you are missing a 2-piece for them, but this also works well with HP scaling characters. The downside is Longevous Disciple is not nearly as flexible and usable as this other set, which is Messenger Traversing Hackerspace. Let me tell you, almost every character in the game can benefit from this set. Supports can benefit from this set, anyone that needs speed tuning can benefit from this set. The 2-piece increasing speed is huge. The 4-piece is actually a little overrated just because if you're speed tuning, it can mess things up. But even then, if you're not speed tuning, then the 4-piece set can be absolutely incredible, and the 2-piece is going to be universally good. These 3 caverns are going to be some of the best ones you can spend your Trailblaze power on in 2024. Unless some newer sets come out that absolutely trivialize these ones, but so far they haven't really done that. At least not for relic sets. Where they have done that is actually for your planar ornaments, which are, well, I mean, there's very clear winners as to who you want to farm. Fruit of Evil and Pouring Blades are going to be your 2 highest value for general use characters, ornaments that you want to farm for. If you're a newer player and you're struggling with crit, Broken Keel is not only amazing because it gives you 10% effect res, but it also increases all of your allies' crit damage. This works great in double DPS teams, but even in hyper carry teams, 10% crit damage just by your support having effect res is great, because effect res is a stat that you're always going to want to have on your supports anyways, just to make sure they don't get CC'd and you just lose because of RNG. If you don't know what set to put on a support, Broken Keel almost always works. In terms of other support sets, Penacony Land of Dreams is also a decent set. It gives you energy regen, but it also gives 10% damage bonus for all other allies that are the same type as the wearer. So basically, if you have Asta with Penacony Land of Dreams, and you have a fire DPS on your team like Hook, that gives them a 10% damage buff. If I gave this to, let's say, Pela, for example, she would give a 10% damage buff to Jingliu for her ice damage. Those 2 sets are crazy for supports, and each one of these support sets comes paired with a damage set. Redolent Arena is a very high barrier to entry set that requires you to have 70% crit rate or higher, but it gives you 8% of that. So technically you only need to have 62% before this set bonus. It makes it so your damage dealt with your basic attack and skill is increased by 20%, which is a massive damage bonus, especially for a 2-piece set. set, and on top of that, it's giving you the 8% crit. But for your crit builds that don't necessarily make that threshold, or for non-crit builds, Firmament Frontline Glamoth is absolutely insane because it gives you a 12% attack bonus, which is just fine, but when your speed is equal to or higher than 135 or 160, you get a 12% damage bonus or an 18% damage bonus. So for characters that move fast, like Kafka, for example, Kafka's already going to want to have a very high speed, and you might even make her over past 160, especially if you play Ruan Mei, giving her 18% damage bonus and 12% attack without her having to reach any specific crit threshold. So this is for your DPS that are crit focused, and this is for your DPS that are just really, really fast that don't necessarily have to be crit focused. But the best part about Glamoth is that even your crit focused DPS can use it. These two Divergent Universe worlds or Simulated Universe worlds, whichever one you're doing, are absolutely insane value and definitely some of the highest value that you can even farm for right now. Now, there was a new one with Firefly that actually works on most supports. Forge of Calpagni Lantern is a very solid set for most support characters, even if you don't utilize the second half with the break effect. The 6% speed buff is the equivalent of running 2-piece Messenger, so that can be very helpful for speed tuning or just trying to make your characters faster. The downside is that not every character can take advantage of the break effect thing, but it is a decent set to farm. The reason I don't recommend it though is because this other set here is not super useful for most DPS in the game. It's specifically useful for follow-up attackers, and it can be very good, but there's a lot of other options that can work for follow-up attackers, especially in pure fiction. This one isn't even necessarily a follow-up attacker thing, but since follow-up attackers have generally been so good in pure fiction, Zagonia has been great for that, and Izumo can work for double DPS teams, which is a lot of the follow-up teams that you would see anyways. For your break teams, if you are looking for a set that's going to be kind of universally good, and maybe you don't want to farm for Forge of Calpagni Lantern, you can always go for Talia and Sprightly Von Walk. Sprightly Von Walk is a great overall support set, where if you're high-end optimizing, not only do you get the energy regen, but you can also get a 40% action forward, which lets your supports basically move first. And Talia is just going to increase your break effect and make it so if you're fast, you get even more break effect. So if you're just looking for general break setups, this one is also decent just because you can get a little bit of both utility out of Sprightly Von Walk, but having at least 1 or 2 sets of Forge of Calpagni Lantern is helpful, especially because of that speed buff. If you're a new player playing Honkai Star Rail, or if you just don't know what to spend your Trailblaze power on, Fruit of Evil and Porting Blades are going to be some of your best planar ornaments to farm for if you don't have a specific character you're farming at the moment. There is also a very high likelihood that we'll get a new planar ornament set for the next patch, and I can't say right now whether or not that planar ornament set is going to be super good, but keep an eye out because it's possible that it could be a good general use set. But since the release of Star Rail, a lot of things have changed, including what sets are really worth it to farm for your DPS characters and for your support characters. And if you are a newer player coming into this game, it's important that you don't waste your Trailblaze power and that you invest into the right way, so that way you can progress fast, beat the end game content, and honestly just enjoy building all your characters and hit really big damage, because I like big numbers, and I think a lot of you guys do too. If you've enjoyed this video, please DoorDash me some Italian food. I would really appreciate that.